Welcome to the National Print Museum for Culture Night. Today we're going to bring you inside and we're going to give you a bit of history about printing. First off, we're going to give you a bit of history about where we are. Today we're in Beggar's Bush. This is a barracks built by the British in 1827. The chapel itself is from 1857. A little bit about myself. My name is John and I do a Heritage and Culture course here in conjunction with the National Print Museum. We do subjects like archaeology, folklore, local history, and then some practical subjects that we turn with the National Print Museum, like customer service and tour guiding. So today we're going to give you a little taste of all the different printing processes. So if you'd like to follow me, I'll put my mask on and we'll go inside. Here we are inside the chapel. This chapel, like I said, was built in 1857 and it houses the collection of the National Print Museum. This collection was saved by the gentlemen that you see around here, collectively known as the chapel. The chapel are a group of volunteers that include the tour guides, past students and the men themselves that have saved these machines and keep them running and keep everything going. So today we're going to give you a little history about that. So we're going to start, follow me. This is Andrew. Andrew, how are you? So today we're just going to give a little brief entry into the case room. So this is the case room. This is part of the National Print Museum. It's a traditional style print museum. It has three main sections. So we have composition, we have printing, and we have finishing. And today Andrew is going to give us a little brief tour of the composition part of it. Andrew, would you like to tell us how you got involved in the museum?
Yeah, sure. So I got started here doing a training course through the ETB. It's a heritage course, but it also teaches you how to be a tour guide. So we learned a little bit about folklore, history, archaeology, and that sort of thing. And that was a year-long thing. I finished up that course, and then I decided I'd stay on for an extra year because there's other schemes involved in the museum as well. So I'm now employed through the education department through a CE scheme. And I suppose I'll teach you guys a bit about how typesetting was done from the 1400s all the way up to the 1800s. So what I have in front of me here is a case of type. And in this case of type, there is small little letters which are movable type. So there's small little letters like so, which you would pick up by hand. And a typesetter would start their apprenticeship at around the age of 11 or 12, and they'd be taught the skills of the trade. So the first thing a typesetter would do is he'd get his compositing stick in his hand and he'd start getting his type and placing it in. He'd work a line at a time. Then he would they'd tie up the lines in page cord, like so. And then that page cord would be placed in a border known as a chase. So this would be our chase here. And then once the type is placed in the chase, you'd use little wooden blocks known as furniture, like so. And that's for headers and footers, margins, that sort of thing. You'd use smaller little bits of metal known as leading to do minor adjustments here and there. And then of course the last thing you need are your coins, which are these little locks that are placed around the sides between the furniture and the chase. And you would lock those in place, and that's actually where you get the term coining a phrase, because you're locking your phrase in with the coins, and once it's locked in, the completed thing is known as a form, and then it's ready to be sent off to be printed. So your finished form would look like this, with your movable type, your furniture, and your coins. So what we're composing on here was traditionally known as the stone. It was a big heavy stone slab that was dragged into the print shop back in the day. Ours isn't a big stone, it's made of metal. And the reason it was a big stone is because you didn't want anyone knocking off a table and maybe knocking off overall the work that you've done. So big heavy movable stone was the best thing to be setting on. Nice and flat as well, they would have sanded it down. So just around us here you'll see we have our case room, and each of these shelves are full of different cases of type. And if you guys would like to follow me over here, I'll show you some of the cases that we have on display in the museum. So on the top here we have this lovely old Irish font, which we're very proud to have. It's a beautiful, beautiful font. And we also have some cases here which we can pull out, and you'll see we've got nice wooden block letters here. So metal type would have been used for smaller letters, and then bigger letters, more commonly you would have used wooden blocks. And I suppose that's kind of it.
Thanks very much.
There's some common phrases as well that come from printing that sort of come from typesetting, just to give you an idea of the sort of impact that printing had on the world. So, as I explained already, coin phrase comes from printing. Wrong end of the stick comes from printing, because if you hand your composing stick to somebody the wrong way to take it, they might set something upside down. And you also, it's disputed, but apparently the phrase mind your P's and Q's comes from printing as well, because lowercase P's and Q's and B's and D's look the same. So one of those is actually a B and one of them is a D, but if you have it upside down, it could be a P or a Q, you'd never really know until you've printed it on a proofing press. So John, if that's everything.
Great. Thanks very much, Andrew. That's brilliant.
No problem at all.
So for 400 years, that was the way everything was done. It was hand set. Then we start going into the Industrial Revolution and things become mechanized. So I'm going to bring it over to the hot metal machines now. I'm going to introduce you to Harry. Now Harry, as I mentioned, this place is run by the chapel. Harry is known as the father of the chapel. So I'm going to introduce you to Harry. Harry, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
I'd love to know a bit about your history and how you got involved in this machine and where it was used.
Well, I worked in the Irish Press for 27 years, the Irish Press newspaper in Burkey. I left it in 1991, but I always retained an interest and love for the printing industry. I worked in other jobs after that. So when Brendan Murphy, the print museum man here, asked me to become involved in the print museum, I leapt at the chance, and I've been involved with the print museum now for about 7 or 8 years. So we're volunteers here, and we come in and do demonstrations on the machines that we worked at when we were in the Irish Press and in other commercial printing houses.
That's brilliant. So when you were actually part of the chapel, could you give us a bit of information about the chapel and what it is and how this place came about?
This place came about in the 1980s when some people involved in the union saw that technology was changing and a lot of the old equipment was going to the scrapyard. They decided that this machinery was part of our industrial history and they wanted it saved. So they saved it and stored it and asked for donations then from various branches of the printing industry, and that happened. The equipment was gathered and it was stored in a basement, and eventually in 1996 they got the use of this old garrison chapel here in Beggar's Bush, which was an old British Army barracks, and it had been an Irish Army barracks for a period of time but was lying derelict. So they got the use of this old chapel, and all the equipment in here now was donated by different companies in the printing industry.
That's brilliant. Now, this linotype, it seems like a very old machine. It wouldn't be still running, would it?
It's still working fine, yeah. This, from the old hand setting system, this was a gigantic leap forward from individual characters of type being set in the setting stick. Now, this machine, when it was invented by Ottmar Regenthaler, a German living in the United States in 1885, represented a massive leap forward. Instead of single individual characters of type, now you had lines of type, and that's where the name linotype came from, lines of type. So this represented a much quicker and more efficient way of setting type, and it led to a huge revolution, faster production. Newspapers could increase the number of their pages from 4 or 8 to 16, 20, 24, 32. It was just a much more efficient system. And this particular type of machine and variations of it, linotype, intertype, Moore saw machines, formed the basis of typesetting in newspapers for 80, 90 years. By the late 1970s in the UK and the United States, these machines were replaced by new computerized technology. In Ireland it was a little slower. The Irish Times changed around 1979, 1980. The Irish Press and Independent changed in the mid-80s. The Irish Press changed in 1984-85. These machines therefore became totally redundant. Even the people who worked them and had honed their skills on these machines, they themselves were redundant as well, even though some retraining was done. But nevertheless, this technology did serve the trade, the printing trade, for about 80 to 90 years, and it was remarkable that little or no change in the design of the machine occurred over all that time.
That's brilliant. That's great history. Is there any chance we could see it running?
Yes, indeed. I'll show you how it works. Yeah. Now this is an old machine, so we have to treat it with. This machine is about 72 years old, and we have to treat it with tender, loving care. So we have a 90-key keyboard, 4 magazines, an assembly box, jaws, mould, and a hot metal pot there at the back with metal at 550 degrees, tin, antimony, and lead. So I'll switch the machine on here, open the keyboard, and I'll just show you how a line is set. I bring down the matrices from the magazines by touching these keys. Just a space band goes in there, more line matrices, another space band, and there we go. Now there's the line set in the box. It's just a pi line, a jumbled line. So we're now going to see how those matrices and the space bands turn into a line of type. I will elevate that line. It will slide across into the jaws, into the head, down into the jaws. The plunger will pump down at the back, pump the metal into the mould and create that line. And you'll see the line ejecting here. When that happens, the matrices and space bands will then come up in the head to the transfer position, and the space bands will return there, and an armature will come down, carry the matrices back up into the distribution bar, and they will go back into the place from whence they came when I touch the key. So, elevate, and it shoots across into the head. Then I let out the clutch and the line goes down into the casting position. The plunger comes down, pumps metal into the mould. The line comes out here, and that's the line there. Now, while the line is being ejected, you will hear the matrices returning into the magazine, which has 90 keys and 90 channels, and all those matrices go back to where they came from. And that's the way it works.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Harry, for that. That's really informative. Thank you very much. So that's the linotype, and the linotype was a huge change to the newspaper industry. We've done the main body of the newspaper. Now we're going to look at the Ludlow machine. We're going to go over to Mike, who's going to explain a little bit about it, and the Ludlow itself was done for the headlines. How's it going, Michael?
How you doing?
We're here today. We just want a little demonstration of the Ludlow, but before that, we'd love to know a bit about yourself and your own history.
Well, I served my time in a commercial printing office. Started in 1959, did 6 years. It was reduced from 7 to 6, halfway through my apprenticeship. When I came out of my apprenticeship, or my time, as we used to say, I went to the University Press for about a year, and then I found myself in Dulwich then afterward, and from there I went to the Irish Press, where I spent the next 27 years. And from there, the money was very good there, so that's why I stayed, really, you know. So, then from there, the press closed, as you know, in 1995, and at that stage I was a journalist, so I freelanced from there on as journalist, and ended up in the Archery Guide as the subbing in the Archery Guide.
And do you enjoy your time in the chapel? You enjoy coming in here?
I loved it. The press was like a village to me. In this chapel, I mean. Yeah. Oh yes, I do. Brendan asked me to come in about 6 or 7 years ago, and I just came in to help out on this. They've just got this Ludlow. This Ludlow machine happens to be the same Ludlow I used to work in the press.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. Now, we didn't do much maintenance on it, but we had a gang of fitters in the press to maintain them. So basically what we did was we set up, the print was set similar to the linotype that you've just seen. We had brass matrices, and we set them up much quicker. We couldn't run out of type because we just kept. Okay. We could also repeat the lines. We had to do repeat lines. We set it up. That's double column. That was the usual size double column, which is about 4 inches, 22 M's actually in the press it was. And put it in like that. And again, we set it going. Plunger comes forward, presses it out. and the lino, the type. This can also be the when you got the lino type out, you supported it because it was overhanging, as you can see. You supported it with blanks, which you cast on this as well, you know, and that supported it while it was being printed. It was superb for newspaper work because it went from 14 point all the way up to 84 point. We have an 84, we have a 72 point there now. That was again, you had to support that with the blanks underneath, otherwise it would collapse. You know, so support it underneath there, and then from there you made it up in the pages. Now, if you wanted wider than 4 inches, what you did was you had a longer stick, a longer setting stick, which is that, and you would put the width of the page. You could put the width of the page. The stick was as long as that. You put the width of the page, and then cast it, and then assemble it in the page, in the length you require. If it was shorter, you could saw it down. We always had a saw available as well to cut them down to size as well. You know.
Oh, that's amazing. That's brilliant. So thank you very much for explaining that to us. That's wonderful. So we're going to move on to the monotype now. If you follow me. How's it going? So we're at the monotype machine here now. Now the monotype is a bit of a step up from the linotype, which would have done newspapers. This machine would have done high quality books and journals. And Brian's going to give us a run through of that.
Yeah, the monotype machine, as you were just saying, is the next stage on from the lino, and it produces in 2 stages. It produces single characters. The keyboard is quite comprehensive, as you can see. Each of these banks determines the actual typeface that you're using, and the cone here determines the size of the typeface that you want to produce. As you type each character, it perforates your roll of tape here, and that then is brought onto the second stage, which is the mono casting machine. These machines were offered and given to the print museum by the late Con Devlin, who was one of the first supporters of the print museum here, and he has recently since died, and his legacy will always be remembered here in the print museum. When this is finished, as I say, the spool is taken on to the casting machine, which actually produces the single character text. As you said, monotype will be used for a higher quality of print finish, and it had a bigger range within its sizes and within its typefaces. And it's probably one of the major, most comprehensive mechanical developments after the linotype in the history of the print. These apparatus finished up around the late 70s, maybe early, about 79, 80 was the last production on hot metal. It carried on a little bit longer in the newspapers, but for general commercial houses where I myself worked, we all went on to photo typesetting around 1980. But so you can take that spool now and show it on the casting machine.
Thank you very much. So we're going to take the spool here. So this has some of the instructions that for the different type and such. So we're going to bring it to the machine. Follow me. So here we are at the monotype typecaster. We have Christy and Brian. Well, hi, how's it going? So this is the encoded page that we had brought from the original piece. So we would hand this over. There we go. And I'd love for you to give us a bit of a history on how this machine runs, and then a bit of history about yourselves and the industry that you're in.
Right. Well, first of all, my name is Brian. We're both called monotype casters because we work a monotype casting machine. The machine itself is very versatile, and it could do the likes of the turntables. You have rules going down and across, very intricate work, and this can do that. You know. Also, it has a very, very good reproduction because it's a single letter each time, and it's not depending on another letter to give it an impression. So, what else? Yeah. We're going to start up now. It's a very, very noisy machine, so I'll show it if I can, but you might hear it. Well, there's the die case there. So you're going to get the different letters in that. And there's the mold. That gives you the body of the letter. Die case gives you the base of the letter. And that's the wedge. That gives you the width. Gives you the width. Okay? So what else do you want to do here? It goes at about 650 degrees to the heat. Okay. There's a compressor as well involved in this, and it runs air through the hole in the paper, and that selects where the pins and the machine come up, and that's the die case to pick out the different letters. You can see the die case doing. Now, you need to go over there to see the die case happening around it. Taking out the letters now.
Starting.
650 degrees in that top there. There's the different letters, and you see they're all single. Because they're all single letters, you get a better impression, a better print, superior reproduction using that sort of format. That's the die case, and you can see that in there, it's bouncing around, picking out the different letters.
That's brilliant, man. Thanks very much for that. That's really wonderful. So that's great. So that's an absolute wonder. It's a lovely sound off that machine, isn't it? Yeah. Absolutely wonderful. So that's composition finished now. That's the 3 hot metal machines. So I'm going to bring it over and give you an example of how they were set out. So follow me.
Thanks very much, lads.
Thanks, lads. See you. So we've just looked at the 3 hot metal machines. So we have the linotype, the Ludlow, and the monotype. And here we have an example of all 3 incorporated into the one page. So this is the actual front page of the Sunday Press, the very last edition that was printed. We've kept it the way it was. So as you can see, we have different examples. We have the monotype here, which was used for the advertisements on the newspaper. This is the linotype used for the main body of the newspaper, and you can see the Ludlow example here. So this is a good way of rounding up the hot metal machines and showing you an example of how they were put together. So let's move on. That's composition finished. Now we're going to bring you to the Gutenberg press, the machine, the invention, probably the greatest in all the world, that set off the scientific revolution. We wouldn't have the society we have today without this machine. So we're going to go back down to Andrew, who's going to give us a brief run through that. We're back, Andrew. So we'd love to get a little example of this Gutenberg press.
Yeah, sure. So where should we start? We'll start with Johannes Gutenberg. This is a portrait of the man himself, and he kind of kick-started the explosion of printing in Europe. So printing did show up in Asian territories first in the 11th century, and movable type showed up around sometime in the 1100s. The date escapes me at the moment, sorry. Yeah, so he kind of perfected a casting method of movable type. So it was his molds moulding metal type that was the big kind of the breakthrough in Europe. So he worked away in secret in 1439, and he was from an area in Germany known as Mainz, which was a winemaking region. And if you take a look at our replica wooden press here, you'll see it's very much like a grape press or a wine press. And it was actually an old discarded wine press that he used to make his first printing press. And we don't actually know what his printing press looked like. The earliest known etching of a printing press is this one here, and it dates about 20 years after his invention. So you can imagine there's about 20 years of improvement on this model here. But I'll show you the basics of the printing press itself. So the first thing would be the bed, which would come out like so. And when the bed opens up, inside you'll see we've got which I was explaining to you guys earlier, we've got a finished form here. So we've got our chase, our furniture, our movable type, and our coins, and everything's locked into place and ready to go. So the next thing that would happen is a man known as a dauber would come along with his daubing stick, and this would be full of ink, so he'd have to be very skilled at what he did, have a very skilled hand, be very careful, make sure the ink didn't squirt out everywhere. And that's where actually you get the phrase a dab hand. So if you were very good at daubing, you would have a dab hand, and that's still in common use today. If you're very good with cars or something, you'd be a dab hand of a mechanic, or if you're good at computers, you're a dab hand of computers. Then the next thing would be, usually the page would be tacked on somewhere there. Our replica is missing that, so we're just going to pop the page down. And then the bed is closed over, and you're ready to print your first page. So the bed is pushed onto the plate here. And this is also where you get the phrase putting an idea to bed or putting an idea to rest, because once the bed is in place, you've committed to your idea, it's ready to be printed and mass produced. And then the last thing is a man will come along with a big stick and he will lower like so, and it's kind of backbreaking work. Ours is a bit easier to do because it's just a replica. And then that will give you your nice impression. And then of course you'll have to bring it all the way back up and drag it out, and then you've only got one page done. It was a lengthy process, but it was still quicker than what they would have done beforehand, which was scribes writing in manuscripts. Our wooden printing press is representative of a printing press from the 1500s. So you're looking at Henry VIII's day, that kind of thing, because this printing press was used as a replica in a TV show called The Tudors, and their production crew would have mocked this up to be used on set. And then once they wrapped up production, they kindly donated it to us, so we have it here. We can display what wooden printing presses would have looked like. Because they were wooden, very few have survived today, wood being a perishable organic material. So what I'll show you guys next is something that lasted a bit longer, which is at the turn of the 18th century. You start to see things like iron cast printing presses. So what we have in front of us here is our Colombian printing press. The Colombian printing press was designed by a man named Georgie Clymer. He was an American, and he was very patriotic, that's why he called it the Colombian, but he also adorned it with symbols of his country. So you've got a bald eagle here and a rattlesnake there. And he had great hopes for this printing press. He wanted to establish newsprint in the west coast of America. He was from the east coast himself. But it was a very big, heavy thing, and they were still building that railroad from east and west. It hadn't met up in the middle yet. So this would have had to be carried by cart across very dangerous territory. And nobody wanted to take that on. It would have been a suicide mission. It would have been more or less hopeless to try. So that's why you've got that big literary boom on the east coast of America. It's where all their colleges and kind of authors tend to be from. And one of the things that kind of made it so heavy and difficult to transport was that it had a counterweight on it. And the counterweight made it very easy to pull the lever, so I can do this with great ease. And you'll notice as well that when the counterweight is pulled, the decorative symbols are part of the mechanism. They also move up and down with it. So you'll notice it's still got the same layout as Gutenberg's printing press. You've got your platen, which comes down. You've got your bed, which is rolled out under there. And so more or less the design of the printing presses stayed the same. They were flatbed. They were usually manned by 3 people. But over time, they kind of evolved and they got smaller. And the one I want to show you here at the end is our Albion printing press. So the Albion printing press was created by Richard Cope. He was an Englishman. Albion being the old name for Britain or England. And these were quite common in homes. So like high society types who could afford such luxuries might have had one of these in their upstairs. They would have used it for printing invitations to garden parties or the plays they're putting on for the neighbours. And it was also kind of kick-started the arts and crafts scene that we know today. This also was used by Lily and Lolly Yates, W.B. Yeats' sisters. they had their own printing press in Dundrum, known as the Dunema Press or the Coola Press. Coola being the old name for the South Dublin region. And they use this to print the works of Irish authors and playwrights and that sort of thing, who mightn't have had a hard time getting published at the time due to British occupation, and kind of all things Irish tend to be sort of looked down upon. So all of these printing presses, as I mentioned, would have been operated by 3 people. So I think John is going to bring you on now to maybe show you a press that would be used by one person. Is that correct, John?
Yeah, we go on to the peerless next.
Sure. Thanks, John.
Thanks very much, Andrew. So, hi Susan, how are you?
Hi, hello.
So,
I'm take my mask off
it's
now.
great to have you here today.
It's lovely to be here, actually.
That's wonderful. This machine takes a little bit of a different direction than the other machines. It's a bit different. Could you run us through the difference?
This machine is a foot operation machine. Just one person uses it. It does one colour at a time. It really only does small jobs. This is the form here, which is where the letterpress that you're going to print appears. This is the ink plate here, and this is where you put the paper to get the print. Now you could do about 500 of these in an hour, and you might use it for just leaflets, small print runs, one colour print runs. This actual press came from the Guinness printing works because it was used to print the labels for Guinness Stout. There was also one of these on the Titanic because it was used on a daily basis, print menu cards, break up the form, disc the type, that's what it's called when you put the type away again, and then you can just do the same thing the next day. So it's a fairly simple one, which I will show you now. So you get it going by pushing the wheel, and then you start pushing up and down here. Now when I'm doing that, the rollers are taking ink from the plate, and they are putting the ink down over the form, which is the letters. And when I think that there's enough ink on the letters, I am going to release this, and the next cycle that will hit there, and we will put some paper in, and that will hit there, and there will be no crashing. Now, people who are doing this a lot, you would have a thing where you took one in, took one out. I'm just going to stop and show you the one that we've got, which isn't very friendly, but it's quite opportune at the moment. And that's it. To make sure that you always get it centrally in the paper, you have these little things which are called lays. They're little metal blocks, and you feed the paper to sit in them. Because obviously if you threw the paper in randomly, there's no intrinsic thing to catch the paper, and each time the paper might be in a different place. So it has to sit in the lays. So one of the preliminary things would have been to establish where the print was going to go and to build the lays around it. Because this is a small job, I just think that at once, and that would be sufficient. There is a mechanism up here where you can feed ink if you're going to be doing it for ages. But that is a very simple
Thanks very much.
letterpress machine.
That's brilliant.
You're
And
welcome.
you're involved in the skills transfer
The
program.
skills transfer
Could you
program.
run us through a little bit of your experience in that?
Well, obviously it was curtailed by the pandemic, which is really unfortunate, but it was so enjoyable because, these machines, it was about passing on the skills to use them. This is a museum, but we don't want these to be museum pieces. This is a living history. These were part of people's lives, the people that worked on them, the people that saw the stuff that they made, and by maintaining them and knowing how to use them, that history does stay alive. I am a printmaker, and it's the physicality of these things that is just so beautiful. Not just that you get a physical object, but the concrete thing, that you can see the ink going on there, the roller going on there. It's just so visible and so concrete. It's glorious.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Brilliant. So now we're going to go over to Christine at the Wharfdale. The Wharfdale is known as the workhorse of the Print Museum. Follow me. Hi Christine, how are you? Good to see you. Good to see you. So today we're here at the Wharfdale. I'd love if you'd give us this is a huge machine. If you could give us a little run through on this machine, and I'll follow up with a little question about yourself and the skills program as well.
Sure, yeah. So this is the Wharfdale, okay? It's the museum's largest press. We went from the smallest with the Peerless Platen to the largest here. There's only 2 operating Wharfdales in the country, okay? And we've got one of them. It came about in the mid 1800s. It came out of England and Yorkshire, and it was really at the heart of the Industrial Revolution, and it is for big jobs. Okay, we're talking posters for this lad and newsprint. You would have probably had a few gents working it, okay? And so we've got the proclamation here of 1916, and the three lads that made up this important document would have used a Wharfdale as well, okay? So that's what we've got here today. So I'm going to show you just really quick. You would have had, you see on the cylinder here, that is a print of what's going to go on the paper, okay? But it's just actually there to register where you need to feed the paper in. So one lad would have been coming over here and lining it up, like so. Thanks, John. And it would have taken the paper and printed it on the other side there. This is a flatbed cylinder press, and we're talking like 800 prints an hour, okay? And I should also say this was donated by the Nina Guardian, okay, of Tipperary. That's where this press came from.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, yeah.
I see here you have some proclamations in front of you. Are these replicas of the original?
They are, yeah. We have an original in the case, and we made a high-resolution scan, and we've made up replicas here that you can buy in the museum.
That's wonderful. They're available in both the shop here and online. We have an online shop that's well worth having a view.
Yeah.
What's the significance of the proclamation?
The proclamation is hugely significant, not just to political history and Irish identity, but also from a print standpoint. The lads did not have enough type to make this one document in one go. So they actually composed the top half here, just at that line. They would have done the top bit, printed several copies, and then taken all that type and composed the bottom and refed the paper in. They had to get really inventive because a lot of the type they had was damaged or from a different case. So you'll notice lots of little quirks, okay? Like the R in the word Irish, that is actually the letter P, and they've added some sealing wax to give it that leg here. And this here was an O, and they cut out a little bit to make it a C, which is really cool.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's absolutely amazing to have an original proclamation here. It's actually the crown jewel as such of our collection. It's absolutely wonderful to have it here. So thank you very much, Christine, for that explanation. That's
Cheers.
absolutely brilliant. So if you'd like to follow me, we're going to bring you to the Heidelberg. So as you can see, we're passing machines here that are getting, we've gone from the Gutenberg press that could do up to 20 a day to the machine that we've just done, the workhorse. We're talking hundreds per hour. But now we're moving through these machines. How's it going? So Peter O'Leary, how are you? So Peter is going to run us through the Heidelberg. Now the Heidelberg machine here is what we consider the Rolls Royce of the print museum. So Peter, if you'd like to run us through the machine itself and maybe a little history of your own.
All right, okay. Well, I think we start at the back because you can't print without ink. So here we have, this is the ink duct, and the ink goes in here, okay? Now, it's controlled, the swing of this roller here is controlled by this lever here. And you can get a minimum movement, or you can get the full swing of it, which we'll see when we turn it on. As I say, the ink goes in here, and the amount of ink that you let out is controlled by these keys. Now, I'll just take this key out altogether. It's very easy putting it back in again. Now, the point of this is hitting at the back of this here. This is the blade. And as you release the tension, there's a space created between the blade and the roller, thereby letting out ink. And that's the same all along there. So the idea is that you get an even flow of ink all the way across, so it's distributed up here. Brilliant. Now, there's a steel roller, composition roller, which is a soft rubber. It can be polyurethane, whatever. It's different over the different decades. It's been changed.
Yeah.
Mainly it's rubber. and a mixture of the same. But it has to be a soft content to ride against any of the steel rollers. So it's every second one. There's a steel, soft one, steel, soft roller, steel.
Wow.
It's alternate compositions. Right, and it's in a pyramid style. If you look at it there, there's the top, and it comes down like that onto the steel drum. And that gives it a good distribution to the foam rollers, which we'll see rolling up and down in a minute. Okay.
That's brilliant.
It's a 1955 manufacture, and Heidelberg, it is the Rolls Royce of smaller machines, but it could have been described as the Aronio duplicator, or it could be a small. I would call it a mechanical computer. There's no memory, of course, but the calibration of everything is just, it's German make. Okay?
German make, okay.
Right.
German engineering.
So I'll put it on. Put the power on. This is the stock. This here, it rises up and down. I won't go all the way down, there's no need. But you can go down to the bottom here, and it can hold up to, depending on the thickness of the stock, it can hold up to between 3,000 and 5,000 sheets of paper. Okay?
How long would that take for the machine to run through?
Okay, you can run at speed up to 5,000 an hour.
Oh, so you'd
But
stock it for an hour?
You can stop it. It'll run at 5,000 sheets an hour, but you'll be really running it fast, and it's not always advisable. So normally you get a nice speed would be 3,500 an hour.
That's a huge improvement on some of the other machines we've seen today.
Oh yeah, well you see, it was the Rolls Royce.
What era? We're the 1950s now, aren't we?
Well, this one was the 1955, and Heidelberg updated every 10 years. And I think the last manufacture of one of these was 1960. And you were asking me about, when I came into it.
Your own history.
I came into the industry as an apprentice in 1962, and there was 3 of these, and the latest model was the 1960. Now they hadn't, as far as I know, because the trade was moving out of letterpress and going into the new technology, and into photolitho and that's developed further still into digital and whatever. But you'll still get pockets of this being used because it's stood the test of time. And it was the bread and butter of small printing. Okay, we started. This is a guard. That won't start unless that's.
So that's a safety device.
That's a safety device. Now, I'd like to see the running of it. Now, I'd like to see the speed up of it, okay? Now, because it's a museum, and I can tell you what's going on, I don't know how to go too far. Okay.
There's a wonderful motion to that. It's almost like a windmill moving.
Now, you've seen this is called the form. You've probably heard. This is the printing form from over here.
Can you hold it?
No, it's okay, it's gone. The frame here is a chase. Okay, this is a chase. This is called furniture. This is the form from which you get your print. And these are coin keys. And it's locked up in a position that you want it on the paper. You might want it, let's say 4 size. And this can take A4 and small. So it's laid out or positioned in a position in the chase. You might want it that way, you might want it that way. It's adjustable to suit yourself, to suit the requirements. Right, you've heard of the phrase, the bed of the machine,
Indeed.
and that's the bed.
So you're putting it to bed now.
That's it.
That's brilliant.
Now, this is a suction bar, okay? And it's controlled by over here. This mechanism, it's like, for all the world like a bicycle pump. I'll run it again, and it's going up and down. And over there it's suction, and here on this it's blast, air coming out, and that helps to control the sheet when it's being delivered. These are backstops. We've all heard of backstop before, haven't we? Speaking of Brexit.
Brexit.
Okay. You can hear the suction. And that's it. Suction there, and there's blast coming out of that silver arrangement there, and there's air coming out there. There's air coming out. There's blast holes here, and the air is coming out when the machine is in operation, and it's controlling the sheet, and that's very effective if you were doing very light onion-sized paper, onion skin paper, the likes of airmail or something like that. You don't see that You don't see that nowadays, unless you're still a letter writer.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much for that run through.
The other few things here. Yeah, I just want to show you this is when you go around the back here. Now, I don't know whether you can see that or not, but there's the main shaft, controlled by the flywheel, and that's the shaft, and it's the main shaft controlling the whole thing.
That's amazing.
The whole mechanism.
That's brilliant. We're going to move on now. So
Okay.
Thank you very much for
Very
that
welcome.
run through.
Thank
That was
you.
absolutely amazing. Thank you
Thank you.
again. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
So we're going to go down to Don now to the Shaw pen machine. So follow me. So how's it going? Introduce you. This is Don Kerrigan. He's one of our chapel members here, and he runs the Shaw pen ruling machine. So would you be able to give us a brief run through of the machine and a bit of history about yourself, Don?
Okay, I'll take my mask off when I'm speaking. So, I served my time in Brown and Owens in South Dublin, and I served my time as a machine operator. The machine was invented to put lines on paper, basically, and most of the work we did with cash books and journals and ledgers, anything that needed lining on, this machine could do it. Multicoloured, reds, blues, greens, whatever. And it was in operation up to about 1980. And then with computerization and other methods of recording, it became obsolete. So we're lucky to have this machine here in the museum. It was given to the museum by Harvey's of Waterford. And it's in fairly good condition considering it's about 50 years old or even more. I have worked older machines than this, but they don't wear out very easy because unlike printing, there's no heavy action on ruling. So the machines are made from wood, willow, and they're unique. People think they're actually a loom, but they're not.
It's very similar.
They're a ruling machine. So if you like, I'll just show you.
Could be wonderful, yeah.
Some of the stuff it does. I have a very basic pattern set up, and I'll just show you how that works. The pens I use are made from brass because the ink we use is corrosive and the brass doesn't corrode, so it's an ideal material for pens. They are in braces for down ruling and cross ruling. They have hollows and the ink flows using gravity from an ink pad, which we have here, made from just ordinary flannel, and the ink flows down through the pens and onto the paper. I'll just show you how that works. I just run one through by hand. It is a powered machine, but I don't think we'll use the power for this. I'll just show you how it works. Just a bit of coaxing. If you like, I'll power the machine and show you the way the sheet goes through the machine down to the box. It allows the ink to dry, the line drying down, because when this is putting water onto paper, so you have to give it time to dry by the time it reaches the delivery box. Therefore you have a long run down. So in operation, a lady would feed the machine, sheet by sheet by sheet, keeping up a good flow of paper, and a good machine feeder is invaluable to a ruler.
Yeah.
That's what we call rulers. I'm not a printer. I'm probably the odd man out in the museum in the fact that I'm not a printer. I'm a ruler, and it's a unique trade, it's a separate trade. And there were several places in Dublin where ruling was done, and in the country, but there are very few people doing it now.
Yeah,
It's only-
and that brings me to another point. I've talked to some of the staff members that were involved in the skills transfer program,
Oh, yeah.
but actually you're one of the mentors of that program.
right.
Could you give us a little bit of information on how it felt to pass on these skills?
Well, first of all, I felt it was very important to pass on the skills. I mean, I'm not going to say how old I am, but I'm very old. And I feel it's necessary to pass on the skills to another generation, because if not, part of this museum is going to die. And we've just got to keep it going. The museum is so unique. We have actually a working setup. And if that goes, then the museum loses a lot. So we need people to carry on the skills. And it was very satisfying actually working with the people. And they were very interested, and hopefully they will use those skills and I'm not around.
Wonderful, that's absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for running us through that. It's absolutely wonderful. And thank you. See you again.
Should we have another look at the machine?
Yeah, actually, before we do go, we will give it another quick run through so for the audience so they can see it running through. Cool. almost like a loom.
The threads carry the sheets. They know they're going to carry the sheets.
It's absolutely wonderful.
People come along and they immediately think that that's something to do with the whirling, but they don't. They're just carriers. And the ink itself is just a dye made up from powder and water. It's a aniline dye, and as I say, you can have it in any colours. And that's like poppy boot blue, so everybody's familiar with that one. So that's what I use for demonstrating.
Brilliant.
Okay.
That's great. Thank you very much, Dan.
Cheers, man.
So now we're going to go to a bit more modern part of the print museum. We're going to go down to the print lab, and we're going to get the education officer, Mary Plunkett, to give us a demonstration. So follow me. Hi Mary, how are you? So this is Mary. This is our education officer here at the National Print Museum. Mary has been involved in the print lab. And Mary, would you be able to give us a little run through what the print lab is and the training that was received?
Oh yeah. So what we're doing here in Print Lab is this was actually a project called Creative Makers, which took place over about 18 months. It was between ourselves and 3 other organisations in throughout Europe. It was the Explorer Children's Museum in Rome. It was Labora, which is a fantastic paper and printing facility in Tallinn in Estonia. And the other one then was Neapolis, which was kind of an innovation centre in Villanova, just south of Barcelona. So we all got a chance to go around and visit each other and see what we all do in our different places. And we were kind of one of the more letterpress based facilities. So what we did was the idea was to kind of use modern technologies with letterpress in the fabrication of these little fab lab areas that would then be in all our little spots and specifically aimed at kids. So hence we now have our print lab. So we have, so we go from things like we have our lovely Vandercook press here, so that we can use that for our printing. We also have a little set of Adanas over here. So these are all parts that were of the existing collection in the museum. And then with the funding that we got from Creative Europe, etc., we've been able to fill up this lovely cupboard we have behind. We have a 3D printer. We have all our inks and everything we need. We have kind of a cutting machine, kind of a plotting computer-controlled machine that will cut vinyl or different stencils and things like that for us. We have an exposure machine in there underneath the pile of stuff. We have little die cutting machines. So we have a number of different kind of more modern technologies that we can use in different ways to incorporate with our letterpress printing and provide some nice workshops for kids and hopefully adults sometime soon, whenever we can have you all back into the museum. So are we coming to the end, are we?
Yeah, we're very close to the end. So
I will say goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Leave you to finish up, John.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's wonderful, Mary. That's absolutely great. So we're just going to finish up with a quick chat, just really briefly. So, how are you?
Hello there.
Could you give us a little, very short history of yourself in the print industry?
I started when I was 15. It was 1950, which means I'm now 85, by the way, but you needn't add up. But I followed my father into the industry. And he started his time beginning of the century, the last century. And he was warned. He was saving scum as a compositor. And he was warned not to go to that trade because it was going to be overtaken by metal, which is the machine his son worked for 50 flipping years or more, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway, he went to the trade and he didn't regret it. Anyway, and he worked there until he retired. And in those days, you retired when you couldn't work anymore. So he retired at 83.
Wow.
And he worked in the Independent until he was 83 in the reading room.
So we just, unfortunately, we're running out of time. So just before we finish, I'd just like to run through a quick thing. The National Print Museum, we have an online service. We'd love for you to come on to sign up. We have workshops normally. I know with the coronavirus, everything's not going according to plan. But do look us up and check it out. National Print Museum. Thank you.
Thank you.